Hello students, welcome to Chapter 1A, Physical Science. Once again, you can each find the notes that you need on the science website that you can actually download and to be able to take your notes on. At this time, we're just going to give it straightforward to you. There's absolutely no rhyme or reason perhaps to the way that this is going to happen. But please understand and do your very best to take as good of notes as you possibly can. The first thing that we need to define is science is a word that comes from the Latin term meaning to know. There are, however, some limitations of science. Number one, is there a supreme being? There's no way for us to be able to test whether or not there's a supreme being or not. Secondly is that we have no way of knowing what something or someone is actually thinking at a particular moment. For instance, we have no idea what a bee is thinking as it's going around pollinating from flower to flower. The next term that you need to understand is the term called technology. Technology is the application of science to help people. Okay, and we have lots of technology around us that we currently use. Everything from cell phones to computers to all kinds of DVDs, VCRs, etc. that we've had over the number of years. So technology is the application of science to help people. Okay, the next term is theory. Theory is the most logical explanation of events that occur in nature. Must be tested over and over. If the test results don't agree, the theory must be changed. For instance, there is a theory called the calorie theory is not true. It was believed at one time that invisible fluid basically fires were fountains of calorie. Now we have what is called the kinetic theory that has since replaced what was called the calorie theory. Okay, next is a law. A law is when a theory has been tested over and over and is accepted as true. It may change. It is a statement that describes what happens in nature. It describes a pattern. Its important thing is to always allow questions, even to theories, even to laws, is to always allow questions. Okay, now we need to define what is the scientific method. And once again, it doesn't really matter what steps of the scientific method and how we really truthfully want to call them, but there is just definitely a sequence that good scientists use to be able to describe what is happening in their experiments. And of course, the first step is to state a hypothesis. Excuse me, incorrect. State the problem is the first thing. You have to know exactly what you're trying to solve in order to be able to run the experiment. The second thing we have to do is we have to gather some information about that problem. The third one is that we have to formulate a hypothesis. And of course, what is a hypothesis? But it's nothing more than a testable prediction, and sometimes we might call it an educated guess. Fourth, we have to perform experiments to test the hypothesis. Now, experiment is an organized process to gather observations and to test a hypothesis. That's all an experiment really truthfully is. Number 5, we have to record and analyze data, making observations. And that's the important part about being a scientist, is that we have to actually make observations and record that data. Next is number 6, we have to state a conclusion. Was our hypothesis right or wrong? And number 7, we have to be able to report on it. We have to be able to actually write it out and submit it to others to take a look at our experiment to make sure that they agree with it. It doesn't do anything good to our society if we just suddenly run an experiment, find out some fabulous knowledge, and then basically put it in a filing cabinet and lock it away. Okay, the next thing that we need to understand is that part of the parts of an experiment. Okay, a variable is in any experiment and is the one factor that is being tested for. We have to control all variables but one if possible. we have what is called a control. A control is a standard for comparison that helps ensure that the experimental results are caused by the conditions being tested for. The experimental setup is the next term, is the part of the experiment that contains the variable. We only try to test one variable at a time. A control setup is exactly like the experimental setup, except the control does not contain a variable. Okay, and another term for a control is also called a constant. Okay, sometimes is used. Data, once again, is recorded observations of the experiment. It's like the numbers. It's like, does the leaf have bright green leaves in color? Has it changed into yellow? Are they starting to curl? Those are types of data that we can actually use. Next, there are two main branches of physical science. They are chemistry and physics. Chemistry involves the study of what substances are made of and how they combine. Physics is the study of the different forms of energy and motion that we will get later to in the year. First part of this year, we're going to start off with chemistry. All right, a constant, once again, is the factor that does not change in an experiment. I just want to emphasize that again. Okay, there are two other terms that we need to understand, and those are an independent variable is the factor adjusted by the experiment. The factor adjusted by the experiment. The example I give is the length of time popcorn is kept frozen. So let's say, for instance, that we have an experiment in which we want to find out how many kernels of popcorn do not pop when they are kept frozen. And so what we will do is we'll put a number of bags into a freezer. We'll take out a bag each day, pop it, count how many kernels do not actually pop. And that would be the independent variable. Okay, the dependent variable is the factor whose value depends upon the value of the independent variable. The example is the number of unpopped kernels. Okay, the number of unpopped kernels. Okay, now just to give you some idea, a model is an idea or a system that represents whatever you are trying to help people understand better. You also need to be aware of, in this chapter, the difference between a line graph, a bar graph, and a circle graph. And at this time, that concludes Chapter 1A, Physical Science Notes. Thank you.